Hello, we're going to look at the healing crises today in relation to the body electronics work. There is 3 metaphysical books that Dr. John Whitman Ray wrote, which is a real foundation to the work of body electronics. He wrote them decades ago, and they are very precious indeed. I have them uploaded on my website. You can find them there free of charge, and I encourage everybody to download them and even to print them off. They're really great to have as a in your hand. So first, they are to be read in order, as the name implies, but today I feel like I'm going to jump into the healing crisis. There's some people preparing for the body electronics work here in Nelson in the intensive here in June. So I'm really concentrating on that group, and as that group expands, to guide people where they can find their literature to really give them the foundation that is imperative to the work. When you get to the body electronics intensive, we'll be concentrating mostly on being on the table and doing the point holding work. I will be there as an instructor, and I will do lecture every day, and I will make time for questions and answers every day for sure. But yet the bulk of the time will be spent on the table, either on the table or holding points. If you're unfamiliar with body electronics, this is a healing modality that is done within community. So people gather, and we're equal in the fact that we are giving and receiving equally. I will be there as an instructor, but everybody in the group will be giving and receiving equally. So there'll be holding points, which they will be guided in the correct methodology. And they'll also be getting on the table and doing their own inner work as people hold points on them. So let's look at a writing that John wrote in the second book of the Logic and Sequence series, called it's just called The Healing Crises. All in all, we perceive only that which we have not denied or resisted, as determined by our unique hologram of thought, feeling, and spoken word, as determined by our unique manner of resistance. Interesting. So even though the principles are the same, and what we encounter as human consciousness here on Earth is quite similar, we each have our own very, very unique, even though we're following the same principles and we're following the same holistic construct, we each create our very individual experience. And then he says, remember, until man can experience on the mental level that which exists on the physical level, he will be bound to the physical. So there's a lot there. There's a lot there to look at in terms of how we get to the mental body. Until we experience on the mental body, we will be relegated to the physical body. Well, how do we get to the mental body? This is really the question that comes to me in that short writing. So we know that we go back the way we came. So we start on the physical level. We then move into, we revitalize the physical level with lots of nutrients. We practice stillness. We practice the 3-part breath without ceasing. And we're ready for the table. We get on the table and we're practicing the stillness and the 3-part breath. And the first thing that occurs usually is that we have an opening into the emotional body. So through what we call unconsciousness, which is the level 7 in body electronics in the scale of emotions, when the emotions start to come into awareness, that's when we get to work with them, and we apply the transmutation principles that are taught both in the literature and in the videos. You can find many videos on my site and on other people's sites who have uploaded old videos, or I have been doing some new videos in the last, but maybe 3 years. I have some old videos that I uploaded too from lectures in my point holding intensives like 10 or 12 years ago. I did video a few back then. Most of it was just done orally, so there wasn't any video being done, but there was a few, and I have uploaded them there. So we can educate ourselves to some degree, but it's really the experience once we get on that table. So we're into the emotional body, we're transmuting our way up the emotional body. And when we get to the level of pain, there's quite a progression in the emotional body. It starts in unconsciousness, comes up through apathy, through grief, through fear, through anger, through pain. And at the top of everything, in the pineal, is what we call enthusiasm, or the God in you, the essence in you that's a transmuting force of all resistance. We can call it love if you like. So from there, we eventually reach, when we do a lot of the transmutational work, we will eventually reach the level of pain. When that occurs, we access the mental body. We access that mental body at each level of the emotional body, because there's 7 times 7 emotional bodies. So each level within those, those emotions that I mentioned, each of those are in each level. So we will reach pain every time we go upscale in each level. So in other words, we'll have the unconscious level of pain. We'll have the apathetic level of pain, the griefy level of pain, the fearful level of pain, the angry level of pain, and then eventually the painful level of pain. And there is 7 levels within enthusiasm. So there is the enthusiastic level of pain, and that is, the cosmos is really cracking open for us at that point. When we get to the painful level of pain is when we get to really see duality very, very, very clearly. How we created our experiences, how those attachments to one side of the duality really are the building blocks of resistance, and that resistance is then experienced in life. So it's undoing. It's what we're doing is uncreating. We're uncreating those levels of resistance that we have clung to, mostly unconsciously. John used to say we're 99% unconscious, and if we argue with that, we're 100. We are very unconscious to the way we create here on planet Earth. So it's our commitment in body electronics to undo and uncreate what we have individually created. What everybody else is doing is none of our business. What we are doing in the internal work, this is where the concentration of energy lies for us individually. So let's look back at what else John says. And I just wanted to point that out, that, let me read that again. Remember, until man can experience on the mental level that which exists on the physical level, he will be bound to the physical. So when we reach the mental level, we will then be very aware of how things are being created. We can release a resistance in the mental body, the attachments that we have, particularly to one side of a duality or the other. There's usually resistance on both sides of every duality. In fact, when I've worked in the mental body, I have seen resistance on both sides always. There's never been a time that I was completely unresistant. Let's look at something like, let's say, Well, most things are sort of determined by vices and virtues. We can put them in those categories. So let's look at them, just that classic good and evil, or good and bad. So we may think that we have a lot of resistance attached to the idea or the resistance of bad, the judgment of what we think is bad, what we think is evil. So we have a lot of resistance to that. But in actuality, when we find our dualities, we will actually find as much or more resistance on the side of good. We're very attached, and we have so many judgments around what we think is good, what we think is right. It's a really interesting process when we actually see internally within the mental body how we are creating in relation to our resistance patterns, relation to our attachments to dualistic thought forms. So let's look a little further. So then John says, please go back to book 1 on the Logic and Sequence series and fully assimilate chapter 33. So I was looking at something I say in my courses often. What makes a good teacher? What I ask the group that question. What do you think makes a really good teacher? And that is a really good student. So when John says, okay, let's go back to chapter 33. So let's do that. Let's go over to book 1, Logic and Sequence, book 1, The Laws of Perfection. I've had this book for decades. It's got, it's gotten a lot of use. So chapter 33 is called The Arena of Life. So I won't read you the whole chapter. It's not very many pages, but we'll kind of just skirt it through, and then you can go back and start from the beginning. As we enter into the arena of life, there will be times when we seek directions and solutions to the troubles we encounter. When these troublesome times arise on the horizon, turn to this chapter and reread. Let us now reconfirm. The heavens rejoice over the antics of a free soul who desires to travel the path of harmlessness. Yet, there are other things to consider as we travel the path of life as compared to the path of death. Many people travel the path of death because their focus is on the outer world and not upon the inner essence. Many people travel the path of death because their desires are for the satisfaction of the demands of the flesh, rather than focusing their desires on karmic completion. And then in brackets, he writes the list. That's another chapter in book 1. Many people find themselves on the path of death because they allow their thoughts to be saturated with separation rather than with unity. Unity occurs within the mental body after we remove all resistance to both sides of duality. Many people want to follow the broad path that leads to comfort, which in turn compels man to the path of death. Rather than overcoming all things, using the methods we have painstakingly taught you over the years. Broad is the way that leads to death, and nearly all enter this pathway. Few there are who see the outer manifestation as but a reflection of the inner essence, and few of those who see learn the mastery of recreation, and fewer still learn the completion of the steps of faith, leading to perfection, which is diligence in action. Now there is a time to plant and a time to reap. There is a time to sleep and a time to rise. There is a time to work and a time to rest, a time to act and a time to consider. A time to desire and a time to dispel the desire. A time to fulfill the desire and a time to say, it is enough. There is a time to proclaim peace and a time to war. There is a time to love and a time to choose, without reaction. The removal of a harmful element from one's midst. There is a time for protection and a time for vulnerability. There is a time for change and a time for the continuation of an event. There is a time to create and a time to destroy. There is a time to take action and a time to wait. There is a time to agree and a time to oppose. I think you get the idea. It is the duality these are all dualities that John is speaking of here. And if there's no resistance to either side of those dualities, then we act perfectly in accordance to unity consciousness. That resistance has to be met and released first. That's what we're saying here. Okay, let's go further in chapter 33, book 1. Let me get to the yang. The yin and the yang, as in taught, how it's taught in body electronics, that is. Acknowledge victory when you are secure to do so. This is timely. There is also a time to acknowledge defeat with equal enthusiasm. Remember, that resistance to any experience in life shall, by the law of attraction, bring that experience into the realms of reality, that we may acknowledge our creation with the joy of recognition. There is a preference in, I've written about it on my, there's one post I think about it on my site. There is a preference that prior to life serving us up our resistances as our experience, we can actually get to that and release those resistances prior to their coming into this this hologram of experience. Do not be complacent and simply experiencing the yin aspects of life with equanimity. So the yin aspect is that experience, it is that outer experience that we have created. This, of course, is the first step to lovingly and willingly endure all things. So I was thinking about that this morning, that principle. So it's really great that's come up in the teachings today. So the lovingly and willingly endure all things is really, truly a principle that applies to everything involved in body electronics. If we can embody the energy of lovingly and willingly enduring all things, then we are on that that path, that ascensional path, that path of uncreation. Yet the yang expression of life must be brought into play through the 10 steps to perfection, beginning with faith. So the 10 steps to perfection, you can find that in John's writings, you can find that in my writings, and I'm not really sure if it's in Doug Morrison's book, How We Heal, but I've written it in many places. Maybe I'll look it up and I'll put it on the Body Electronics group page for everybody to look at today. Be patient and realize there is a time for seclusion as well as a time to be in the forefront. There is a time for greater change as well for time for silence and peace. There's a time for bringing good works to the minds of people. He says man, but I just put in people there just to be a little bit inclusive, as well as a gestation period for those works. A child is conceived, but its gestation period is 9 months to prepare for birth, such as it is with every great contribution. Okay, let's just, I feel just to jump forth a little bit. Okay, this is still in the chapter 33. Okay, this is a highlighted piece. We do not truly have free agency until we can enter into the mental body wherein exists the capacity to recreate simultaneously both the inner and outer, the yin and the yang, the cause and the effect. Okay, let's look at that for a minute. So in body electronics, the cause is the inner essence. That is referred to as the yang. And the yang is, in the mental body at least, relegated to thought patterns, which are dualistic formatted. That creates the emotional body. So we have the emotion that is always present within every dualistic format, with every thought pattern. There's always emotion. We may not be aware of it, but there is always emotion present with that. And there is also the word, the vibration. It can be an internal word, but the word, when it is spoken externally or when it is written, it becomes a very, very powerful source in the creation process. So those are our three creative principles that we find within the mental body. And that's what we're working with. The emotional body is like a subset of the mental body. So we go through, like I said earlier, we go through the emotional body prior to the full ability to access the mental body. It's progressive. We access the mental body progressively as we're moving up the scale of emotions. Yet at that painful level of pain, what I mentioned earlier, is really like the doors swing wide open. The calcifications have been really cracked off of the pineal. The endocrine system is really, really functioning at a high rate at that point. The the vitality, the physical vitality is really, really functional. And we enter the mental body where we get to truly, truly uncreate. So remember, the yang essence is that inner essence of creativity, and that's those creative principles, what I just mentioned. So that's the creativity, that's the creative forces that I speak of, but what is written of in the body electronics literature. And that's what we're here to do, is we're here to find that, and we're here to uncreate any resistance pattern, any attachment that we have put on a dualistic format, so that we can bring that dualistic, that form of dualism, that yin-yang aspect, into harmony. So then what is created from that harmony is then made yin in the externalized hologram that we call life here on planet Earth. I think that's enough for today. I'll keep doing this as I'm inspired. I'll keep doing these short teachings, and if you have any questions regarding it, please address them on the Facebook group page, the Body Electronics Experience. No, it's just called Body Electronics: The Evolution of Consciousness. And then people can really interact there, and there's some really good questioning going on there, and I really appreciate that. And not just questions, if people have comments or input, please add them there. There's some people there. There's at least a couple of people that I know of, maybe 3 people that come to mind right in this moment, that are body electronics instructors, people that have had cranials, people that have studied the work and done a lot of point holding. So let's, the cranial, when people move through into cranial electronics, they're, even though maybe they haven't formally taught body electronics, they really have risen to a great level of lovingly and willingly enduring all things. Okay, I will end there. Thank you. Thank you very much for watching.